Good day. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We are today very privileged to have with us one of the course participants from the Intermediate Expert Witness course, Luyanda. I hope I pronounced that more or less right, Luyanda. And she is going to take us through a journey regarding her professional life and certain thoughts that she has around the medico-legal sphere. But I think we must just give a very warm welcome to Luyanda. And Luyanda, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ian, and the viewers. My name is Luyanda. My Nwala is actually my husband's name, and my professional name that I'm using is actually Mapekula, which is Mapekula.
Yeah.
I live in East London, and I'm practicing as a clinical psychologist in private practice. I've got a background in social work and some experience in the psychiatric sphere, which was basically a psychiatric hospital, before I pursued my postgraduate studies, and which I did at Pretoria, and also that master's at the University of Cape Town, qualifying basically, I think, in about 1995. And I've been working in East London basically since then, and having worked in one of the major hospitals, which was, in a ward with mental health disorders. And then after that, I actually went into private practice, which was in about 1999. And then I've been in private practice ever since. I find the work quite challenging because the work that I do is actually a mix. But I think when I started out, I was actually just concentrating on the psychotherapy, but also with some assessments, normally basically, the IQ assessments. And then I think IQ, that is also the mental assessment of mental health disorders. And then because the training, that is the master's training, allowed us to actually have exposure to other professionals like the neurologist in Protescue, as well as the neurosurgeons, and also doing basically internship, part of the internship in that ward, which actually exposed us basically to various conditions that actually affect basically the brain functioning. And I think that also basically urged me to kind of like, my entry into that is the medical legal work, because then we actually had to compile reports, etc., etc. It's been a long journey, because I think in terms of the work that I did, then I started working in, I think in about 3 years after I started the practice. Then I actually had a gradual interest, entry into the medical legal field, and also attending workshops, and also drawing on the information that one gets, I think, from supervision, and also from the multidisciplinary teams, and also reading. So my interest, I think, basically also has evolved over time in terms of just understanding more, especially, I think, the brain, and also, I think, thinking basically through whatever, when I'm working, what could this mean basically in terms of basically the brain functioning. And I must say, I've kind of like enjoyed the work, because now I'm actually officially post-retirement. I'm basically in between my mid-60s and basically going up, but I'm still quite active in the practice.
So you've had that clinical foundation, and then the medico-legal work really that you superimposing, putting on top of that clinical foundation. Maybe share with us your thoughts on how important it is, or how necessary it is for any expert. Now, obviously, we're talking from a clinical psychologist perspective, but for any expert to have that practical experience when you are doing expert reports and doing expert witness work in medico-legal matters?
Yes, I think, Ian, my experience has been that you actually, when you go through the training, there's a lot of information that you actually acquire in terms of basically, the the teachings, the lecturing, and also I think even the exposure basically, to a neuro ward and actually understanding those conditions. But I think that information also becomes quite important because it lays the foundation, and also I think your confidence in terms of actually venturing into something that's also basically going to be take you into a legal arena, which is a completely different scenario. And I think, as you said, basic, I think when you made the presentation that it can actually be quite anxiety provoking, and it can also, I think, make you doubt your skills and what you know. But I think getting it from somebody who's also an expert and saying that you know this thing, and it's basically up to you to actually tell or educate the judge, make them understand what how you have arrived at certain decision, how you went about it, which involves quite a lot of. I think you talked a lot about reasoning through the work that you do,
Very much so.
because sometimes you can actually get immersed in it, but sometimes you also need at the same time to actually do reflections about what is this meaning, what is this, if I'm sitting there in front basically at the court and I'm actually um, you know giving giving evidence, then what are the things that I need basically? What are the other things other than just doing a report that are likely that are likely to come up in the course of my presentation? So I'll make an example. If somebody basically is actually in a rural area, because in East London, you sometimes actually have got to do work in the rural areas in the former Transkei. And when you go to a village and somebody basically has orthopedic issues, or maybe a part of base of a gross motor functioning, they can't walk, then basically you actually have to make the court aware that this and this will need basically to be taken into account, although it's not within the area of my expertise. Then it might need somebody with an OT to actually look at what will be the needs of this person, given basically what they have gone through or the severity of their injuries, and also how to navigate basically their space. So just to summarize it, is that you learn, but then you also acquire information that actually also adds on to what you have learned at varsity. And also you also have to internalize that information in such a way that you can actually present it in the form of an expert evidence, and having thought out basically the consequences that are psychological in nature for this particular person that you actually assessing.
Yeah, and that's I agree with you completely, and that's also where we do emphasize in the course. The first thing is to understand what the issues are, so that you know what points that you're addressing, what you need to deal with, and then your reasoning process. You're quite right to raise that, and the reasoning process really consists of two parts, which is obviously the facts that you need to get right. And then there's the what you would say the clinical side of it, the reasoning itself. So applying those facts to that case, and then bringing your own clinical knowledge to bear, and then eventually to come to a conclusion. But when I say knowledge, it's knowledge acquired, and you're right to make this distinction, acquired through either formal qualifications, learning, or experience, which is really to me the most important one. Or it could be training, as was also a very important one. So it's your formal learning, training, or experience. But of the three, just from my perspective, it's the foundation is the theoretical knowledge, the qualifications and the training, but it's the experience that you bring to bear that really helps you. I'd say of the three is the most important. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes. I also think that keeping also abreast of, of the knowledge, it's also important, because you don't just do a report, you must also understand that what could this potentially mean, and also, working in such a way that you're not really stagnating. And I think this course has actually afforded us an opportunity to actually reflect on the work that one has done. And I think for me also, the mistakes that one has done that they could have done differently. And also immersing yourself then in another area of work from another discipline, and also how to go about basically integrating what you know and taking it out basically to the court. I've had quite a lot of experience, I think, in terms of like attending court work. I've done quite a lot of, medical legal reports, but haven't really had basically any instances. I think I've had one or two. One was actually in Durban, and I think one was in Amtata. I think on actually attending court work, and I think I must admit that I felt actually quite lost, even basic in terms of navigating. I think the whole scenario, and I think basically the rules that often apply to courts, and this actually was quite, eye-opening in terms of that. And at this particular point in my life, I also thought that, okay, um, I, I think around COVID time, there was, when there was not a lot of work that was coming through. And then I tended now to focus more on the practice side of things, because we're not really having a lot of referrals coming through. And I think to manage practice, then one actually needed to kind of like stay grounded in terms of actually having the overheads. But I think now that basically I'm having more time, and I'm thinking that I can actually afford that, because I'm still basically, and a member of SACNA, and basically involve and attend basically all the, the lectures that are available. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. I really, yeah, everything you've said, I so agree with that. It's so important. And, that experience of which we find with many experts and you mentioned this as well, is you're going from one discipline, which is your medical professional discipline, into now a legal professional discipline. So one of the ideas behind the course is just to give people a general understanding so that they don't feel so lost. They've got a general idea of what they're supposed to do. And that's part of skill building, Luyanda, because once you understand what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it, you start developing those skills. And then through those skills comes confidence. Once you've got the skills, then true confidence comes through, which is so important in litigation work.
It is indeed.
Okay, Luyanda, so we're nearing the end of our time together. Maybe you just want to give us some concluding thoughts on your experience and on clinical psychology and medico-legal work within that context in particular.
There's actually, because normally when we get an instruction, and I think one of the things that you actually mentioned is that somebody actually has got to give you, when you actually receive an instruction, you must understand what it means, and it must be written quite succinctly. Because when you also compile a report, and I think the part where you actually doing your executive, summaries, you actually also have to actually gather your thoughts. And we've spoken a lot about illogical reasoning, because you're actually having a lot of facts basically about the litigant, if I can put it that way. And then having that information, which involves, quite a lot of psychometric assessments, which is basic, the basic cognitive functions, which is the verbal processing, etc., etc. And also, I think as you're working through that, you also want to understand, well, if they are not processing this information basically, how could this impact on them? Because you're actually preparing basically a report. And then memory, abstract thinking, you name the whole range basically of functional abilities that the person may also premorbidly had, and also how they have been affected. So in terms of narrowing it down, and the important thing is actually I've found the challenge is that being a person who's a closer speaking, and the work that is medical legal work, you also need to be able to put your ideas across. So it means basically expressing yourself basically in written language is also important because you actually have got to put something that is actually tight in terms of basically putting your reasoning so that it actually makes sense before you draw conclusion and actually make some recommendations. That has been a challenge, I think, coming basically from a background where I'm predominantly speaking Xhosa and basically actually having to actually navigate and also put, that is the conclusion in a way that is actually going to be quite useful for somebody who's actually a judge so that they can understand what I'm saying and it follows basically a pattern of thinking. And I'm also able basically to respond if there are any queries that come up during the course of that. So when I prepare I prepare a report looking at the possibility that I will need basically to explain some of the terms that I've put through and what they mean from the clinical experience I've had. But I also think going further, because let's say, for example, in one person, you actually have somebody who actually has had probably, a premorbid history, that was basically not really excellent. And I have got to start asking myself these questions about what is the difference? What makes this basically different? Because this person basically has had this accident, this person basically has lost basically 5 members of their family in a tragic way, and basically they were already premorbidly, had some form of mental health. Then what makes basically this particular, issue of medical negligence? What if I'm actually narrowing it down to a mental health? What makes it different? If I'm asked the question, can I really be able basically to give something that distinctly separates basically these? And also I think the fact that we need to be honest when we actually, because this is kind of like any profession has got ethical, values that we need to uphold as professionals. That basically you can say that, look, at this particular point, this person basically was coping, but this one actually was actually a setback. And I think I'm still looking also to kind of like understand that part, because basically why are they not coping? Were they coming better before? And when this happened, did what makes it worse than it was if it was already basically
Exactly. And that can raise sometimes quite complicated causation questions. Luyanda, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and a treat listening to you. And as always, a real pleasure interacting with a senior professional with many years experience and insight into the subject. And I thank you for the compliments you gave to the course, but I also wish you all the best in your practice. And this video is really just to honor your professionalism and your professional life. And I thank you for the time you've taken to attend the course and to do the interview. I know it will help your colleagues, it'll help other people, but it also just puts a spotlight on you as a professional. So, Luyanda, it's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's been very eye-opening. I actually would recommend it, because
Thank you very much.
I think it just add basically quite value to that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the feedback. Thank you very much, Luyanda. Go well. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.